Hello, thank you for stopping by. This is intended to be a really quick tutorial to show you how I would use powdered shell gold to do some gilding. To get us going though, I wanted to pick a pattern that I could recreate quite quickly, and this is the floral pattern that I've chosen. You can see that I'm simply taping a piece of tracing paper over the design at the moment, just to be able to trace this pattern through. With a soft pencil. I'm using a 4B, which will help us later to transfer the pattern onto our chosen final paper. As I start to trace, I'm holding the tracing paper down quite firmly with my left hand as I outline the pattern with the pencil. As you go, it is important to check that you're aligned properly and the tracing paper hasn't moved. And here you can see me lifting the paper just to show that the pattern has been fully traced. Once that's done, you can remove your paper and you're ready to move to the next step. Before we jump ahead and start to transfer our pattern, I wanted to talk about paper preparation very briefly. Here you can see me burnishing a piece of paper. The paper has already been tea stained and allowed to dry. It is actually a watercolour paper, which is made of 100% cotton, so it's very, very good quality and it's very strong. The reason we burnish paper is to create a really lovely smooth surface. This will really help us when we're painting and we're gilding, and allow us to create really smooth, fine lines with our gold, with our paint, which is really helpful when you're working on an intricate pattern. Here you can see me holding the paper up to the light. You can see that the paper has now developed a lovely shine, and that shows that the burnishing is working and the fibres are really flattening and smoothing out. You can actually do this for quite some time, and I'd recommend, if you are going to burnish your paper, to do this for at least 15 to 20 minutes before you start to transfer your pattern. We're now ready to transfer our final design onto the prepared piece of paper. You can see here that I've cut the tea stain paper down to the size that I need for this motif to fit on, and taped the pattern or the tracing down, face down, onto the tea stain paper, ready to be transferred. We're now ready to actually transfer the pattern. I'm doing this using an agate burnisher, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, because we will use this tool again. You can also use a spoon, so you don't need specialist equipment, or you could use the cowrie shell that we used earlier to burnish the paper, or any smooth flat surface to help you transfer this pattern. As you can see, what I'm doing is I'm checking that the pattern is actually transferring fully, so that I will be able to see all of the outlines later. It's very important to go round carefully and systematically and make sure you transfer each section of the pattern before you actually remove the tracing paper, ready for the next step. Traditionally, at this stage, some illuminators use walnut ink to ink the pattern in. The point of doing this is twofold. It makes the pattern fast, so that when your hand moves across the pattern when you're painting or outlining, you're not rubbing the pencil lines away and losing the actual shape of the pattern. But it also helps you familiarise yourself with the curves and the outlines of the pattern, and it's just really good practice. What I just wanted to show very quickly is the brush that I'm using on this particular design. It's a size 10-0 sable brush from Rosemary & Co, and it's one of my favourites actually when it comes to outlining. What you can see me start to do here is to ink the pattern in. Unfortunately, it's not a great angle with the camera and it's quite slow, and I do recommend you take your time if you're going to do this stage, because rushing just doesn't work. It's all about taking a deep breath, taking your time, enjoying the movement of the brush, enjoying seeing the work come to life, and working on your lines in terms of the weight, the thickness, the fineness. It's a really meditative process. Whilst I'm not going to show you whilst I ink the entire pattern out, it doesn't actually take too long, and I know many artists that will tell you this is their favourite part because it's so peaceful, and I hope you enjoy it too. Here you can see I'm just about to finish the inking process. It probably took about 10 minutes to do this pattern, so not too long, and once it's done we can move on to the gilding stage. So now we are ready to start the gilding process. What you can see here is some shell gold, which is made of powdered gold. It's very similar to the stuff that you can buy directly already made up in little half pans or quarter pans, I think it comes in. In this little pot I've got some water. You can see that it's already got some gold granules in there, and I use this water, I don't throw it away, to actually wash the gold brush which I'm showing you now. This brush is also dedicated to gold only. I don't use it to paint anything else. And I also have a supply of clean mineral water on hand to use with the gold. The better the materials here, the better, the cleaner the water, the better your gold is going to appear when you have painted it on your paper. To get the gold ready to paint with, we simply start by adding a couple of drops of clean mineral water and start it to agitate the surface of the gold carefully. You can see that the water starts to soften the gold up fairly quickly, and just take your time to gently work at the gold. This gold already has gum arabic in it, so we won't need any additional substance to use as a binder. All we need to do really is to wet it, get it to the right consistency to paint with, and then we're pretty much ready to go. The same applies to the shop bought shell gold, powdered shell gold that you can buy, and often comes in little quarter pan pellets. I think you can buy that from Cornelison or from Rights of Limb or from Robertson's or other suppliers. You can see here that I continue to work at the gold, working to get the consistency just right. It's a little bit like Goldilocks and the porridge. You don't want it to be too thin, or the gold will be too thin on the paper, but nor do you want it to be too thick and gloopy, because the gold will not spread and you won't be able to paint with it. I'm just pointing out here on the design where I'm going to actually add the gold, but once the gold is ready and it's at the right consistency, we can then start to paint. So I'm ready to go. My brush is loaded with gold, and I start to apply that on the paper. Because the shapes that I'm painting here are quite small, my usual technique here would be to do a little outline and then fill the brush with gold again, and essentially gently place the gold on top and fill the colour in. You can add more if you want a really good coverage, or less if you have less gold to go around. It's really up to you. It really helps that the paper is actually being tea stained here, because any gaps that you might find in your gold, if you don't have enough gold and you need it to stretch, if you like, the gaps are a little bit hidden because the paper has also been stained this lovely yellow colour. So that's a little secret tip that one of my teachers gave me many years ago. Hopefully you can see the gold that I've applied is quite generous here, and I'm just going to lift it up and show you in the light what it looks like as it catches the light. Sorry, you can see the fine particles of the gold glistening, and they will dry relatively quickly. So do be careful as you move your paper around. You may well need to add additional drops of water as you go. As I said, the gold will dry relatively quickly, but that's fine. It's an iterative process. You will have to keep adding a little bit of water, agitating the gold, getting it back to the right consistency. Quite a lot actually, depending on how much you have to paint. But that's essentially it. I would add that it's a slightly different process when you're working with shell gold that's been ground from gold leaf, or been made from gold leaf that's been ground by hand. You, when I use that type of shell gold to gild my work with, I would use either, again, gum arabic or gelatine as a binder. That gold is much less grainy, I find, than this, I guess, shop bought gold here in the UK. Essentially because I guess it's made from a different type of gold. I'm not sure about the manufacturing process, to be honest, of this powdered shell gold, but it certainly feels a little bit more grainy. But I wanted to show how to do this exercise with the shop bought gold, because it's the most widely available here in the UK, at least, and I would have thought elsewhere in either Europe or the US. So just a couple of things to be mindful of as we finish off the gilding element, or the application of the gold. Just make sure that you're happy with the gold coverage across all of the different areas that you have gilded. Now's the time to perhaps touch up or add if you think it's a little bit thin in places. Do have a careful look, but I think this is looking fine as it is. So the next stage would be to clean off our brush. If you have any excess gold on that brush, as you can see here, I'd try and wipe it back into the actual main supply, which is clean, before you actually wash your brush in the dedicated little pot that I recommend you keep, just for washing your gold brush in. That way you can reclaim that gold once there's enough in there, and you can simply wash it and reuse it again. Do take care of your equipment, and it will last for a very long time. I've been using that particular brush for at least 5 years now, and it's absolutely still as good as it was when I started using it initially. Here we can also now see that our finished piece is fully gilded, and we are now able to get ready to burnish. But before we do that, it's just worth showing you how the gold looks it'll look the same in your little pan. That's absolutely fine. If you just put it to one side, it will dry out in its own time. It shouldn't take too long at all. And the next time you want to use it, you do exactly the same thing, and start by adding a couple of drops of water, and getting it back to the consistency you need it to be for painting. In the final stage of our gilding process, we're going to go back to our agate dogtooth burnisher. It's called dogtooth burnisher because of its shape. I think that's hopefully fairly self-explanatory. And we are going to use the burnisher to polish up the gold. But what we're not going to do is jump straight in and put this burnisher onto the gold. For this type of powdered gold or powdered shell gold, I would always use a piece of glassine paper or acid-free tissue paper, and initially burnish the gold through that layer. It's a little bit gentler, it's softer on the gold, it will stop the gold from becoming scratched or damaged, and just gets the process started. So just before we get started, just a couple of quick tips. I always keep my burnisher resting on some soft fabric, or the felt pocket that it lives in. It's quite a delicate substance, the agate, and it could easily become scratched, and if it is scratched, it will damage your gold whenever you try to burnish it or anything else with it. So always keep it resting on a soft surface if possible. Now, as we get ready to actually start the burnishing process, place the glassine paper on top of the shape that you want to burnish, and then firmly and gently we can start the actual process. So here we go. Hopefully you can see, even through the glassine paper, once we start to apply a little bit of pressure and gently move the burnisher across the glassine paper, the gold starts to shine, and there you can see how beautiful that looks, and it actually takes very little effort to bring that to a shine. The next thing to do is obviously repeat that process on all of the areas that you have gilded, and again, just one by one, move the paper around, apply the glassine gently but firmly, apply some pressure, and move your burnisher back and forth across the area that needs to be burnished or polished. And once you have finished that, you can actually feel it under the glassine paper once it's ready, because there will be no more resistance, and then you know you're done, and then you can move on to the next piece, and so on and so forth. Just to finish and wrap up, I've actually sped the film up a little bit, but I do want to say that once we have finished burnishing the gold through the glassine paper, depending on whether you want to see if you can get a slightly brighter shine, we can actually go back over the gold without the glassine paper and polish the gold again a second time gently, to try and bring up an even brighter shine. I don't actually think we needed to do it here because we've got a really great finish already, but once you've actually done the half burnish through the glassine paper, it is okay to go back over the gold directly with the burnisher to just finish off. And that's pretty much it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you found that helpful. If you did find the tutorial interesting or helpful, then please give me a thumbs up. I hope you liked the video. Do comment below if you have any questions or if you'd like to share any feedback, and let me know what kind of thing you might like to see in the future. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me ramble on, and I hope you find it useful and you can use it in your own work. Thanks again. Bye bye.